The much ballyhooed midterms are finally over. Expert analysis coming up. And what did the elections tell us about the gun grabbers and the effort to roll back the Second Amendment? All this and more on this edition of Truth is Making a Comeback.
Truth is making a comeback. America's top stories with Lisa K. Donner.
In the end, it was more of a blue night rather than a blue wave for the Democrats. Still, the left finally got what they wanted, and that is control. Control of something, anything. And so it will be the House, where the Dems will rule and reign for the next 2 years. Americans are well known for preferring divided government, so it will be fascinating to see whether the Democrats want to legislate a few burning issues in the bipartisan manner, or if they want to ratchet up the antipathy against the president and investigate with an eye on impeachment. Today we have a special roundtable of our top political analysts to discuss the fallout from the midterm elections. Joining me today are Joe Schaefer, Liberty Nation's national correspondent, and Graham J. Noble, our chief political correspondent and satirist. Welcome, gentlemen. Listening to Mitch McConnell today, I swear I almost heard a little bit of Schadenfreude, kind of a, well, this is what you wanted, now what you going to do with it. Do any of you sense that there is a bit of relief on the part of the GOP that they aren't the only ones who are large and in charge? What's your take on this, Graham?
I think that really probably Democratic Party strategists will probably be possibly a little disappointed in the overall outcome of this midterm election. And I say that because on the one hand, you can say, well, midterm elections are all about controlling legislative power. And of course, they did actually win control of the House of Representatives. So you got to give them that. But obviously, the scale of their win doesn't really warrant the term blue wave. I also think that they failed to capture the governorships of two very important states, Georgia and Florida. And I think that was probably a blow to them because they would have loved to have captured those two governorships. And of course, then actually losing seats to the Republicans in the Senate was not a desirable outcome for them either. So, I think all in all, and of course, and now they're the top dogs in the House of Representatives. They can't sit back and simply blame the Republicans for everything now. They've actually got to do something. All of a sudden, they're in the spotlight, and the onus is on them to do something positive rather than just be, obstructionists as they have been. So all in all, I don't necessarily think the night turned out fabulously well for the Democrats, to be honest.
All right. Well, it's interesting that you say that because, Joe, I'm wondering, are the Democrats really going to get down to business and legislate, or are they going to do what they have long threatened, and that is to investigate? What's your take?
They're going to investigate because their goal is to obstruct. They want to obstruct Trump's agenda. And they're in a position now that they're going to be able to do that, unfortunately. I don't think you can spin this as a winning night for the Republicans. The Senate is more important than the House, but they wanted to keep that House majority. I thought they had a good chance of it. I wasn't sure. It wasn't the blue wave, that's for sure. I've written a lot about how the Democrats have become a self-marginalized party. I really believe that, which is why you see them not winning these statewide elections, losing these Senate races, the key governor races. But apparently they can still win congressional districts, being as self-marginalized as they are, appealing to a narrow base. And there's an awful lot of people in these urban and suburban areas that are electing Democrats. So we have divided government. And, it's fitting because we are a divided country.
Yeah, Graham, do you believe that this is really a calling card for the Democrats to go hard left maybe in 2020? You're a chief political satirist, and I would think you're going to have some fun with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Oh well, yeah, she's a godsend for anyone who enjoys a little humor. Obviously, I mean, just great. But I think generally, I tend to take a little bit of the opposite view. I think it is a point well taken that the left basically adopted the Obama's Iranian strategy, which was flying pallets of cash in, thinking that they were going to get the desired result. And of course, they also threw in Oprah there as well, and some other people, and of course Obama himself. So they really, they threw as much as they can at these races in the South, where these progressives are running, and yet they still failed. And so I think, yes, it's worth a note of caution saying, they came pretty close. All these races were close, and maybe they shouldn't have been that close. But I think considering the time and effort and resources that the left put into these races in Georgia, in Texas, in Florida, and they still came up short in all of them, I think it says a lot. And I'm not sure that, I believe that the Democrats will continue to go further left, because that's just the progression of their party, the ideological progression. But I don't think that is, I don't think it's going to be a winning strategy for them in 2020.
Joe, do you think we're looking at some bipartisan legislation on immigration or maybe health care? Do you see that in the tea leaves? I'm wondering if Americans are kind of talking out of both sides of their mouths. They say, we want to get things done, and then they vote for a house divided. Do you think this is effective democracy at work, or do you think this is because Americans really don't want to get anything done?
I just think it's the reality of what America is today. We are a house divided. We're a split nation. We're a divided nation. I don't think Democrats really want to work with Republicans, and I don't think Republicans can work with Democrats when they're so stridently partisan. So it's two fundamentally different worldviews on what kind of nation we're going to have. And I was hoping that there'd be some kind of consensus around Trump's populist nationalism growing more, but the House kind of refutes that. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, there's still a big pushback on that, and so we have divided government. And you look at some of these results, none of the voting is surprising. The Democrats won in the urban areas. You look at Texas with Cruz. Beto O'Rourke's votes were San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Houston, very predictable. So we have, urban versus rural. It's more complex than that, but we're two different nations, and we're going to have to resolve this some way. It's almost, I don't want to use hyperbole, but it almost is a cold civil war. I hope it isn't that extreme, but I think we're pretty close to that.
All right, that's Joe Schaefer, Graham J. Noble, and you can find their fine articles on LibertyNation.com. Thank you all for joining me today on Truth is Making a Comeback.
Truth is making a comeback. America's Top Stories with Lisa K. Donner.
Well, the GOP may have taken a bit of a hit on Election Day, but so did the gun grabbers. As it turned out, those politicians with high NRA ratings were elected, and those rated poorly by the National Rifle Association got the boot. Joining me now is Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Lisa.
So you viewed the election through the prism of the Second Amendment and wrote an article about what you saw. It was kind of an interesting premise. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, as the election results rolled in throughout the night, it seemed apparent to me, Lisa, that the NRA had a real big win on its hands, creating in the U.S. Senate a firewall against new gun control legislation. They were able to successfully oust a number of very anti-gun control senators and install in their places pro-gun senators. So I think it was a very big win for the NRA on election night.
All right, let's look at some of the Senate races. Let's begin with Florida.
In Florida, A-rated Rick Scott defeats Bill Nelson, F-rated. Bill Nelson wanted to be able to, he was for the proposition of removing firearm ownership rights from people who were added to the do not fly list. Wow. It's important to refresh everybody's memory that addition to the do not fly list did not come with any due process protections. So when faced with governing bodies and politicians that are hostile to gun rights, there's no guarantee that anybody would actually have a right to keep and bear arms if that was in fact the law. And gun owners saw that hostility and came out in support for Rick Scott, who was one of the enemy number ones of official, unofficial gun control spokesman David Hogg.
Okay, up next we have Texas.
In Texas, Beto O'Rourke, the out-of-state billionaires club, Lisa, spent mightily in Texas in order to secure a win for Beto O'Rourke and for gun control. Bloomberg and others donated and campaigned heavily in the state against Cruz, and the A-rated Cruz ekes out a win. You can only imagine if Beto O'Rourke wasn't such a strong gun control proponent, he may have won that race.
Let's go now to North Dakota.
Yes, Heidi Heitkamp, I think, suffered mightily from her opposition to Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. The NRA saw that as a sort of bellwether vote, and she suffered mightily for that.
How about Missouri?
Claire McCaskill, this gun control, again, Lisa, I think it's important to say, wasn't just an offshoot or tangential issue in this race. These races are highlighted because it was one of the main issues in the race. NRA President Oliver North went there to campaign for Josh Hawley and let the citizens know that if they wanted to keep their gun rights, they needed to send McCaskill home, and that's what they did.
And finally, Tennessee.
In Tennessee, I think is the funniest of all, Lisa, because there, Phil Bredesen, running against Marshall Blackburn, got in trouble not just for his gun control position, but his position on the ratings themselves. When he was governor of Tennessee, he earned an A rating from the NRA, but he's since turned that into an F rating, or excuse me, a D rating, because of his supports for gun control. And in a campaign commercial for this Senate seat, he said he was rated as an A member when he was governor. The misleading fact is leaving out that had turned into a D rating, and that shows you how important the rating itself is for these politicians and for Tennessee, and what happens when he's called on it. He's now not a senator-elect, and Marsha Blackburn is.
So summing all this up for Second Amendment people and people who believe in the right to keep and bear arms, what do you have to say to the gun grabbers in the final analysis?
Well, I think it is a big win for the NRA and for gun rights, and I think that no matter what happens in the House, fortunately for us who do appreciate holding these rights, that the Senate will be there to stop any encroachments on those rights for the time being.
That's Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Thanks, Scott, for always keeping an eye out for our liberties. And finally, for my parting shot this week, we've talked a lot about the impact of the elections on just about everyone save one person, President Trump. What will this mean for him in the next 2 years as he tries to implement his Make America Great Again platform? Joining me now is senior political columnist Tim Donner. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Lisa.
So it seems one area where the president is strengthened will be his impact on the judicial branch, which got even larger last night. Do you agree with that?
No question about it. I mean, with a strengthened majority in the Senate, it's at least 53 seats, perhaps 54, and the Senate now requiring only a simple majority vote to confirm federal judges. The president should have a glide path in continuing his record pace of appointing judges, and he may even get a shot at a third Supreme Court pick before the dust all settles. I mean, he'll be in a position where he no longer has to beg the likes of moderates Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski to vote for his judicial nominees or any new appointments to the cabinet, including the new attorney general.
Now, despite the fact that the Democrats control the House, in a way, Trump has consolidated his power and over his own party, hasn't he?
Well, It's pretty much undeniable, Lisa, that Trump's tireless campaigning, those electric campaign rallies in front of massive and adoring crowds, contributed an awful lot to those Senate pickups by Trump-friendly candidates in Indiana and Missouri and Florida, and perhaps in Arizona as well. And his late appearance in Texas, by the way, may have saved Ted Cruz, who narrowly squeaked by against the progressive godsend Beto O'Rourke with a very narrow victory. So given this infusion of reliable Trump loyalists in the Senate, the departure of Trump critics, Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, plus the retirements of those 40 soft Republicans who quit while the quitting was good earlier in the year and now are probably regretting it. That's mostly what cost the Republicans the House. But with them gone now, Trump has a pretty clear path to dominating the party, and something unthinkable before November 8th, 2016 has now become a reality. The Republican Party is truly the party of Donald Trump.
Well, thanks very much, Tim. Fascinating stuff. We'll just have to see if he governs with the opposition or not. Thanks for joining us, senior political columnist Tim Donner for LibertyNation.com. Thanks for coming on Truth is a Comeback today, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Exhausted by all the fake news? On LibertyNation.com's YouTube channel, facts and fresh, bold analysis are what you get without the leftist spin. Subscribe today to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel and get our Truth is Making a Comeback, America's Top Stories, with LN Editor-in-Chief Lisa K. Donner, an alternative to the leftist programs on TV. 5 facts, just the facts, ma'am, without the liberal bias. LN Radio, syndicated from coast to coast on the Radio America network. Listen to all the big names in politics with your host, Tim Donner. LN TV, the right analysis with our Liberty Nation authors from across the globe. The Uprising Podcast, fun and entertaining commentary on what's really going on in the swamp with Scott Cosenza and Tim Donner. All this and more when you subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel today, because
Truth
Is
Making
Comeback.
truth is making a comeback. Visit us at LibertyNation.com.